Welcome to the most apologetic video you'll ever watch. Today we're covering every negative Canadian stereotype, and before you comment, we're not all like this, eh? Yeah, we know. These are stereotypes. Some true, some exaggerated, all hilarious. If you're offended, sorry. Actually, not sorry. Let's go. The hockey dad. This guy lives vicariously through his 8-year-old's slapshot, and you can spot him from a kilometer away. He's the one screaming at the teenage ref who makes $12 an hour, driving a pickup truck with so many hockey stickers, you literally cannot see the original paint color anymore. He's dropped $3,000 on equipment for a kid who will quit next season to play Fortnite, but he's already planning which junior league scouts to harass. He has the entire Zamboni schedule memorized for every rink within a 2-hour radius. And his calendar is just hockey practice, hockey games, and hockey tournaments. On weekends, he wakes up at 5 in the morning to drive across the province so little Connor can play against kids from Thunder Bay. But here's the thing, he actually volunteers countless unpaid hours, genuinely wants kids to learn teamwork and discipline, and only gets violent in the parking lot. So really, he's keeping community hockey alive one screaming match at a time. The I'm moving to America guy. He threatens to leave every single election, but has been saying this for approximately 15 years, and he's still here drinking Tim Hortons. He complains about taxes constantly while using free healthcare at least 6 times per year for things that would bankrupt an American family. He watches Fox News religiously and thinks Tucker Carlson makes valid points about Canadian politics despite never having lived here. He posts, "Trudeau is destroying this country" on Facebook from his iPhone while sitting in his paid-off house in a safe neighborhood with clean drinking water. Whenever gas prices go up even a penny, he starts researching Texas real estate. But then winter comes, and he forgets about it until the next election cycle. Ask him why he hasn't moved yet, and he'll have 17 different excuses, ranging from family obligations to job commitments to, "I'm waiting for the right time." Deep down, he knows he's got it pretty good up here and would absolutely hate American healthcare costs. But admitting that would ruin his entire personality, so he stays and complains, which is honestly the most Canadian thing possible. Tim Hortons, at 6 in the morning. Walking into a Tim's at 6 a.m. is like entering a fluorescent-lit purgatory, where hope goes to die and everyone's just accepted it. There's a lineup stretching out the door even though it's minus 30 outside, and nobody's complaining. Because complaining won't make the coffee come faster. You've got construction workers ordering 12 coffees with incomprehensible modification instructions like double but only 1.5 sugars in the third one, and make sure the milk is actually milk, not cream. Someone always forgets to order Timbits and holds up the entire line to go back and get a box of 20 mixed, which means you're getting 5 honey glaze whether you want them or not. The smell is a unique combination of burnt coffee, old fryer oil, and broken dreams, but somehow it's comforting. There's always that one table of old guys who've been sitting there since 5 in the morning, solving all of the world's problems over stale donuts and medium roast. But honestly, Tim's is the great Canadian equalizer. Cabinet ministers and crackheads stand in the same line. It's way cheaper than Starbucks. And the coffee is actually decent, despite what snobs say. It's a third space that's actually democratic and accessible, which is more than you can say for most places. The Tim Hortons worker. These people are overworked, criminally underpaid, and dealing with double addicts at dawn who act like coffee is a constitutional right. They get yelled at in both official languages, which sounds impressive until you realize it just means twice as many people screaming about their order being wrong. They can make a double completely blindfolded at this point and have legitimate PTSD from the morning Timbits rush, when Karen needs exactly 12 old-fashioned plain, but the batch only has 11. They know every regular customer's order by heart, including the guy who comes in at 6:47 every single morning and orders the exact same thing, but still recites the whole order like they've never met. They've cleaned bathrooms that look like crime scenes, scraped gum off tables that's older than their employment, and smiled through interactions that would break lesser humans. During hockey tournament weekends, they're basically running a military operation, serving hundreds of people who all need their orders right now immediately. Ask them what the worst part of the job is, and they'll say it's a tie between the morning rush and the afternoon rush and the evening rush. But here's the reality. These workers actually keep the entire country functioning. They're basically national heroes who deserve $50,000 salaries minimum. Without them, Canada would collapse by 9 a.m. The oil patch worker. This guy drives a lifted F-350 with truck nuts hanging off the hitch and a "Fuck Trudeau" decal covering the entire back window. He makes $200,000 a year, but complains constantly about how hard he has it and how Ontario doesn't understand real work. He owns camouflage in every color, including patterns that don't exist in nature, and his idea of dressing up is a clean Carhartt jacket. He can't go 10 minutes without mentioning rig money, or how he works 14 days straight, then gets 7 days off to blow his entire paycheck on toys. His Instagram is just pictures of his truck, his sled, his quad, his dirt bike, and his boat, all financed at interest rates that would make an economist weep. He thinks environmentalists are all unemployed hippies who've never done a real day's work, and brings up the carbon tax in conversations about literally anything, including breakfast cereal. He voted conservative and will tell you about it unprompted, and thinks Alberta should separate and become its own country approximately once per week, usually after his 6th Pilsner. But strip away the bravado, and he's doing genuinely dangerous work in minus 40-degree temperatures that would kill most people. He keeps the Canadian economy running whether environmentalists like it or not. Works harder than most people ever will, and honestly deserves his paycheck even if he's insufferable about it. Winter November to April. Canadians complain about winter for literally 6 straight months, but act completely surprised when it shows up every single November like clockwork. You'll see one guy wearing a full parka with fur hood at minus 5 degrees, standing next to another guy in shorts and a t-shirt at minus 15, because it's warming up, bud. Everyone's car refuses to start at least once per winter, usually when you're already late for something important, and you spend 10 minutes scraping ice off your windshield while questioning every life decision that led you to living here. People say, it's not that cold when it's minus 20 with wind chill that feels like minus 35, and they genuinely believe this makes them tougher than people from warmer climates. The Weather Network becomes everyone's most visited website, and you check it obsessively, like it's going to change if you refresh enough times. Someone always posts on Facebook about wearing shorts in February, like they've achieved enlightenment, instead of just poor circulation. Black ice turns every parking lot into a skating rink, and everyone drives like they've forgotten how winter works, despite experiencing it for 30 consecutive years. But honestly, the fact that Canadians survive and even thrive in conditions that would collapse most societies is genuinely impressive. It builds character or hypothermia, possibly both, and there's something beautiful about a country that just refuses to let weather defeat it. Plus, winter activities are actually incredible if you stop complaining long enough to enjoy them. The aggressively bilingual Quebiecer. This person refuses to speak English even though they're completely fluent. And you know they're fluent because they switch to perfect English the second it's convenient for them. They'll correct your French pronunciation with visible disgust, like you just insulted their entire family tree, and act oppressed, despite living in a province that's 95% francophone with language laws protecting them. Ask for directions in English in Montreal and they'll pretend not to understand you. But the moment they need something from you, suddenly their English is flawless. They refer to the rest of Canada as les Anglais, like it's one homogeneous mass of people who all hate French, ignoring that most Canadians genuinely don't care what language you speak. They'll tell you Quebec is a distinct society that deserves special recognition, but also demand full participation in Canadian federal programs and equalization payments. They think learning English is cultural genocide, but expect every Anglophone to be perfectly bilingual, and get personally offended if you don't understand their rapid-fire joual. During the playoffs, they become the most obnoxiously patriotic Canadians on earth, but the rest of the year, they're one referendum away from leaving. But here's the thing, they're actually protecting a unique culture from being completely swallowed by English-speaking North America. They're the last French bastion in an ocean of English, and their concerns about cultural preservation are legitimate. Plus, Montreal is an incredible city, and poutine is a gift to humanity, so honestly, they've earned the right to be a bit difficult. The hockey arena. The local hockey arena smells like a combination of sweat, Zamboni exhaust, and Tiger Balm, and it's somehow always freezing cold even in the middle of summer. Parents live vicariously through their children's potential NHL careers, while the kids are getting concussions at age 12 and learning creative swearing from coaches. There are fights in the parking lot over ref calls, and someone's always threatening to take this outside, like they're not already outside in minus 20. The guy with the air horn should legitimately be arrested because he's using it for every single play, including offsides and icings. The concession stand sells the saddest hot dogs you've ever seen, and coffee that tastes like it was brewed during the last Olympics. Someone's mom is always selling 50-50 tickets, and someone's dad is always complaining about ice time costs, while simultaneously signing his kid up for 3 additional tournaments. The boards are covered in ads for local businesses that may or may not still exist, and there's always one ad that's just someone's dad's plumbing company. The dressing rooms smell like a biological weapon and haven't been properly cleaned since the arena opened in 1984. But despite everything, it's a genuine community gathering place where people actually show up and support local kids. It teaches valuable life skills, keeps kids active and off screens, and creates memories that last forever. Plus, it's way better than soccer, where everyone gets a participation trophy and nobody learns about real competition or the importance of dental insurance. The Toronto finance bro. This guy genuinely thinks Toronto is the center of the universe and gets confused when you mention that other cities exist. He wears his Canada Goose jacket when it's plus 15 degrees because the coat cost $1,000 and everyone needs to see it. He refers to anywhere outside Toronto as either the cottage or Northern Ontario, even if you're talking about Ottawa, which is a 4-hour drive away. He works in finance and makes decent money, but spends it all on rent, bottle service, and Uber Eats, because cooking is for poor people. He pays $2,800 per month for a 400 square foot apartment with no bedroom, just a den, and genuinely thinks this is normal and desirable. He thinks he's cultured because he ate at a restaurant in Liberty Village that serves deconstructed nachos for $30. Every conversation somehow circles back to Toronto real estate and how his condo has appreciated 40%, ignoring that he's paying $900 monthly in maintenance fees. He's never been west of Mississauga or east of Scarborough and thinks Muskoka is cottage country, even though it's barely 2 hours away. Ask him about other Canadian cities and he'll say something like Vancouver's nice but expensive, while living in the second most expensive city in North America. But strip away the insufferable attitude, and he actually is keeping Canada's financial sector globally competitive. Toronto is legitimately a world-class financial center that drives a huge portion of the national economy. He's just completely unbearable about it, and should maybe visit Calgary once. The coastal elite people from Vancouver and Toronto think the rest of Canada is flyover country, full of farmers and people who've never seen sushi. They complain endlessly about housing prices while voting against any density increases in their neighborhoods because it'll change the character. They spend $8 on lattes daily and think this is normal financial behavior, then wonder why they can't afford a down payment. They refer to any city with a population under 500,000 as a small town, and genuinely cannot comprehend why anyone would choose to live there. They've never been east of Ontario or west of British Columbia, and think Manitoba is just an empty space between the important parts of the country. They post on social media about supporting local businesses, but only shop at chains, and order everything from Amazon. They're shocked, truly shocked, when they visit other provinces and discover there's actual culture and interesting things happening outside their bubble. They think they're progressive, but their progressivism stops exactly at their property line when it comes to homeless shelters or affordable housing. They've been talking about leaving Canada for years because it's too expensive, but never actually leave because deep down they know they have it incredibly good. Tell me in the comments which coastal elite behavior drives you most crazy, but honestly, Vancouver and Toronto are genuinely world-class cities that drive the national economy and attract global talent and investment. They're not wrong that they're important, they're just insufferable about reminding everyone constantly. The cities actually are incredible places to live if you can afford them, which almost nobody can anymore, but that's a different problem entirely. The cottage. The cottage is fake rustic luxury that costs more than an actual house in most provinces and requires a minimum 4-hour drive north of Toronto through bumper-to-bumper traffic. Torontonians pretend they're outdoorsy by spending weekends at their $500,000 cabin that has marble countertops and underfloor heating. Everyone complains about black flies and mosquitoes, like they didn't voluntarily choose to visit the Canadian Shield in June. There's always an argument about boat maintenance or dock repairs that somehow becomes a referendum on someone's entire personality and work ethic. The Wi-Fi is terrible, but everyone brought their laptops anyway because they can't actually disconnect from work for 48 hours. Someone inevitably gets drunk and falls off the dock, and someone else gets way too intense about a friendly canoe race. You'll hear phrases like up north used to describe Muskoka, which is literally 2 hours from downtown Toronto. There's a grocery store 30 minutes away, but people act like they're surviving in the wilderness and need to ration supplies. Someone's dad is always grilling something while wearing socks with sandals and a faded concert shirt from 1993. But honestly, cottage country provides access to genuinely beautiful wilderness and lakes that look like screensavers. It creates real family memories away from screens and city chaos. And there's something special about jumping into freezing lake water at dawn. It's an escape from the urban grind even if people are insufferably pretentious about their rustic retreat that has better amenities than most hotels. The Mountie RCMP officer. Mounties never actually wear that red serge uniform except when posing for tourist photos, and they're honestly tired of explaining this. They deal with moose on highways more than actual crime in most rural detachments. And yes, that's a real problem when a moose totals your car. They have to explain approximately 47 times per day that no, they don't ride horses everywhere, and no, the hat doesn't come with the regular uniform. Americans are deeply disappointed when they show up wearing normal police gear instead of looking like a postcard from 1920. They cover territory so massive that Americans literally cannot comprehend the distances involved, sometimes driving hours between calls. They're dealing with everything from domestic disputes to wildlife management to that one guy who keeps stealing street signs for his garage collection. They get asked to pose for pictures constantly and have perfected the polite smile that says, "I have actual work to do, but sure, one more photo." Rural postings mean they're also the ambulance, the fire department, the animal control, and the marriage counselor all rolled into one. They've seen some genuinely bizarre stuff that would make city cops question reality. Like the guy who called about aliens that turned out to be his neighbor's drone. But despite the goofy stereotype and Disney expectations, they're actually highly professional officers doing important work. They maintain law and order across impossibly vast rural areas with limited resources, and they do it well. Plus, the dress uniform actually is iconic and makes Canada look good internationally. So there's that. Hockey playoffs, April to June. When playoffs start, the entire country basically stops working, and nobody even pretends to be productive anymore. If Vancouver loses, there are riots and burning cars. If Montreal wins, there are riots and burning cars. And Toronto is just perpetually disappointed regardless of outcome. National productivity drops roughly 40%. And everyone suddenly becomes a hockey expert who can't believe the coach made that line change. You see jerseys worn on Bay Street by people who make $500,000 yearly and haven't touched a hockey stick since high school. Every bar is packed with people drinking $20 beers and screaming at televisions like the players can hear their coaching advice. Offices have pools running with money that probably violates some kind of gambling law, but nobody cares because it's playoffs. People call in sick the day after big games, and everyone knows they're lying. But management lets it slide because they were also watching. Social media becomes completely unusable with hot takes from people who just learned what icing means 3 weeks ago. Friends stop talking to each other over disputes about penalties, and someone always brings up that one bad call from 6 years ago. But honestly, playoffs create genuine unifying national experiences that bring people together across regional and cultural divides. It's pure passion and excitement for something that actually matters to communities, and those shared moments of celebration or heartbreak bond people. Plus, it's way better than being obsessed with celebrity drama or reality television, so at least Canadians care about something with actual skill involved. The Prairie Populist. This person blames Ottawa for literally everything wrong in their life, including bad weather and their truck breaking down. They drive a pickup truck that's never been used for actual work, just trips to Costco and Tim Hortons. Their vehicle has at least 3 "Fuck Trudeau" stickers, and possibly a Confederate flag, which makes zero sense because this is Canada, but here we are. They complain endlessly about equalization payments while living in a province that literally created the formula decades ago and benefited from it. They think Toronto and Montreal are stealing their money and giving it to lazy Quebecers who refuse to work, ignoring actual economics. They post angry Facebook rants about the carbon tax from their heated garage while idling their diesel truck for 30 minutes to warm it up. They're convinced rural Canada is ignored and disrespected, and honestly, they're not completely wrong about that part. They think every federal policy is designed to destroy the West and prop up central Canada at their expense. They want separation one week and a stronger voice in Confederation the next, depending on oil prices. They've never actually been to Ottawa, but have very strong opinions about everyone who works there. These are just stereotypes, though, and plenty of prairie people are perfectly reasonable and not driving around with truck nuts. But the populist types do have some legitimate grievances buried under the anger. Federal policies genuinely have favored Ontario and Quebec historically, and rural areas do get ignored by urban-focused politicians. The frustration about being overlooked and economically squeezed is real and valid, even if the proposed solutions are sometimes questionable. They're not wrong that the West gets a raw deal sometimes. The beer store LCBO. Walking into government-run alcohol stores feels like entering a dystopian future, where buying beer requires paperwork and a background check. There's always a security guard eyeing everyone like they're about to commit a heist. And somehow, there's always a lineup no matter what time you arrive. You're paying $45 for a 24-pack of mediocre beer that costs $20 in Michigan, but that's the price of living in a nanny state. The clerk is silently judging your wine selection, and you can feel their disappointment radiating across the counter when you choose the $9 bottle. You have to show ID even if you're clearly 47 years old, with gray hair and stress lines from paying LCBO prices for decades. Someone's always returning empties with an overflowing shopping cart that smells like regret and poor life choices made over several months. The fluorescent lighting makes everyone look sick, and the whole experience feels vaguely punishing, like you're being shamed for wanting to drink. Selection is actually decent if you ignore the prices that make you want to drive to Buffalo for a booze run. But the system does prevent American-style alcohol chaos where gas stations sell vodka to teenagers at 2 in the morning. It keeps alcohol regulated and taxed properly, employs thousands of people with decent wages, and the recycling system actually works efficiently. The revenue goes to public services instead of private profits, which is honestly better even if the experience is depressing. Plus, you're not dodging crackheads in the parking lot like some American liquor stores, so small victories. The lobster fisherman. This guy is up at 4 in the morning when normal humans are still in deep sleep cycles, heading out to freezing Atlantic waters in the dark. He speaks English, but you literally cannot understand a single word because the maritime accent is essentially its own language at this point. He drinks an amount of alcohol that would hospitalize most people, but remains completely functional and operates heavy machinery. He pronounces boat like boot and house like whose, and gets genuinely offended if you point this out because that's how words are supposed to sound. He owns more plaid shirts than an entire clothing store inventory combined, and owns exactly one outfit for formal events that still involves plaid. His hands are destroyed from years of hauling traps, and his back is shot from decades of physical labor that would break younger generations. He's in a constant fight with the government over fishing quotas and regulations that he thinks are designed by city people who've never seen the ocean. He's up before sunrise 6 days a week in all weather conditions, and thinks anyone who works inside is soft. His idea of a vacation is staying on land for 3 consecutive days and maybe fixing something on his boat. But honestly, this is back-breaking work in some of the most dangerous conditions imaginable. The Atlantic in winter will kill you if you make one mistake, and these guys do it year after year. They feed the entire country lobster rolls and keep coastal communities economically alive. The maritime fishing culture is genuinely tough and worthy of respect, even if you need subtitles to understand what they're saying. Canadian Thanksgiving. Canadians are incredibly smug about having Thanksgiving at the right time in October before winter hits, like they've discovered some genius life hack. Everyone pretends this holiday actually matters to them, even though most people forget about it by the following Tuesday. It's supposedly about harvest festivals and being grateful, but mostly it's about eating dry turkey and pretending your family gets along. The entire country acts like the October long weekend is culturally significant, then immediately goes back to work without mentioning it again until next year. Americans don't even know Canadian Thanksgiving exists, and Canadians are weirdly defensive about this fact. Someone always makes the same joke about real Thanksgiving, and Americans copying us but later, even though the holidays have completely different origins. The food is identical to American Thanksgiving, which kind of undermines the whole ours is different and better argument. People post on social media about being thankful, but it's mostly just pictures of food that looks exactly like November American Thanksgiving food. Schools barely acknowledge it, and most businesses are open the next day, so it lacks the cultural weight Americans give their version. But honestly, having it in October actually is better timing than late November. The weather is still decent, harvest season makes actual sense, and it's not crammed against Christmas in a stressful holiday gauntlet. It's not commercialized into an absolute hellscape of consumerism and family drama. It's just a chill day with family, good food, and no pressure, which is genuinely nice. Plus, it means Canadians get to smugly watch Americans stress about their Thanksgiving and feel superior, which is a national pastime. The Sky Resort instructor. This person is perpetually stoned, lives in a van behind the resort, and somehow still affords $180 lift tickets on instructor wages. They peaked in high school when they were really good at skiing and decided to make it their entire personality forever. They call everyone Bud or Boss, regardless of age or actual relationship, and it's impossible to tell if they're being friendly or have simply forgotten your name. They own 7 beanies in various colors, but have 0 career plans beyond next weekend's powder day. Their life goals include skiing, smoking weed, skiing while high, and maybe eventually buying a Sprinter van instead of living in a Civic. They're either from Quebec, British Columbia, or Alberta, and they think people with office jobs are fundamentally broken inside. They've sustained approximately 15 concussions from skiing into trees, but claim they're totally fine and definitely don't have brain damage. Their Instagram is just pictures of mountains with captions like "living the dream" and office views that make desk workers question their entire existence. They eat expired food from the resort cafeteria and think paying for lunch is for suckers with real salaries. Ask them about their 5-year plan, and they'll look confused because planning beyond next snowfall is for people who've given up. But honestly, they're living the actual dream, while everyone else is trapped in fluorescent-lit cubicles, slowly dying inside. They chose happiness and freedom over money and mortgages, and they genuinely love teaching kids to ski. They're doing what they love in beautiful mountains instead of commuting 2 hours daily to jobs they hate. So maybe they're not the crazy ones. Maybe everyone else is. Parliament Hill. Parliament Hill has genuinely beautiful Gothic architecture that looks like Hogwarts designed by Canadians who apologize a lot. It's constantly swarming with tourists taking selfies and blocking the sidewalks while searching for the best angle of the Peace Tower. There's perpetual construction happening somewhere on the grounds, and nobody knows what they're building or when it'll be finished. Protesters with unclear messaging are always blocking traffic and screaming about various causes, some legitimate and some completely unhinged. The eternal flame is supposed to be this solemn symbol of confederation, but drunk people continuously try cooking hot dogs over it. Mounties in full dress uniforms stand around for photo opportunities while secretly dying inside from answering the same questions 500 times daily. Question period inside is just grown adults screaming at each other like kindergartners who skipped nap time, and it's broadcast nationally. Someone is always honking their horn about something. Usually truckers who are mad about fuel prices or mandates, or the general concept of government. Security is surprisingly relaxed, considering it's literally the seat of national government, but that's because Canadians are generally too polite to storm anything. The surrounding area is full of bureaucrats escaping their offices and tourists who expected something more exciting than watching people yell about agricultural subsidies. But despite the chaos and circus atmosphere, it actually is a functioning democratic institution that's free and accessible to visit. The architecture genuinely is stunning, the grounds are beautiful and well maintained, and citizens can actually access their government without military checkpoints. It represents a stable democracy that works reasonably well despite everyone complaining constantly, which honestly is pretty good by global standards. The government bureaucrat. This person is fluently bilingual but weaponizes it as a gatekeeping tool to make you feel stupid for only speaking one language. They take 3-hour lunch breaks, and somehow this is allowed and accepted as normal government behavior. They process absolutely nothing in under 6 months minimum, and that's if you submitted all 17 forms correctly the first time. They'll have entire conversations simultaneously in both English and French, switching mid-sentence, and somehow it's still completely incomprehensible to everyone listening. They have job security that private sector workers cannot even imagine, and they know it, which makes them insufferable during economic downturns. They make decent money, have incredible benefits, and will retire with a pension that'll pay more than most people's current salaries. Ask them to explain any process, and they'll direct you to a website that hasn't been updated since 2009 and doesn't answer your question. They're experts at saying a lot of words that communicate absolutely no useful information, a skill perfected over years of training. They view the public as an annoying interruption to their day of processing forms and attending meetings about future meetings. Someone asks what you do for work, and when you say you're a government worker, what do you think they picture? Probably this person. But strip away the stereotypes and they're actually dealing with completely insane red tape and contradictory regulations while trying to serve 40 million people across 6 time zones. The bureaucracy isn't their fault, it's the system, and most of them are genuinely trying to help within impossible constraints. Someone has to process the paperwork that keeps a massive country functioning, and honestly, that's a harder job than it looks from the outside. Canada Day is peak apologetic patriotism, where everyone gets politely drunk while wearing flag capes and acting mildly enthusiastic about being Canadian. Fireworks get cancelled for incredibly vague reasons like safety concerns or weather, even though it's perfectly clear outside. Someone always burns a flag as protest about pipelines or Indigenous rights or Quebec sovereignty, which honestly is the most Canadian form of protest possible. The celebrations feel weirdly subdued compared to American July 4th chaos. Like everyone's patriotic but doesn't want to be obnoxious about it. Politicians give speeches that nobody listens to, and everyone just wants to get to the free concerts and overpriced food trucks. Families spread out blankets in parks and pretend their kids aren't having meltdowns over the heat and boredom of waiting for fireworks. Someone's wearing a full Mountie costume despite not being a Mountie, and someone else has a beaver hat in plus 30-degree weather. The whole vibe is, we're proud but not too proud because that would be rude and American. People post Happy Canada Day on social media with maple leaf emojis, then go back to complaining about housing prices. There's always one person who shows up in full red and white face paint looking absolutely unhinged and completely committed. But honestly, it's actually refreshing to have non-aggressive national pride that doesn't involve military worship or exclusionary nationalism. The celebrations are genuinely inclusive and welcoming to newcomers, instead of gatekeeping who counts as real Canadian. It's just families, food, and fireworks without the toxic patriotism, which honestly the world could use more of. Plus, free concerts and watching people get wholesome drunk is quality entertainment. The Maritimer in exile. This person works out west, making oil money, but never ever shuts up about back home in the Maritimes and how much better everything is there. They're sending half their paycheck home to family, because that's what you do when your entire province has no jobs except fishing and tourism. Their accent gets exponentially stronger with every beer consumed, until they're completely incomprehensible to anyone west of Quebec. They measure all distances exclusively in Tim Hortons apart, like that's a standardized unit of measurement that everyone understands. They talk about donairs constantly and get personally offended that nobody out west knows what they are or how to make them properly. They're homesick all the time but can't actually move back because there's literally no work and they have student loans from going to university out of province. Every conversation somehow circles back to how the ocean is better than mountains and how prairie people don't understand real weather. They drive 4,000 kilometers home for Christmas without complaint, because missing family holidays would literally kill their grandmother from disappointment. They know everyone from their hometown and can trace how they're related to basically anyone from the Maritimes within 3 connections. They post pictures of the ocean constantly with captions like missing home, while making triple what they had earned back east. But honestly, forced economic migration is a genuine tragedy that tears families apart across impossible distances. They maintain family connections and cultural ties despite being thousands of kilometers away, which takes real effort and sacrifice. The loyalty to home despite better opportunities elsewhere is actually beautiful and shows what matters most isn't always money. Plus, they're keeping their families afloat financially while slowly dying inside from homesickness, which deserves respect, not mockery. The apologetic retail worker. This person says sorry when customers bump into them, when the store is out of stock, when the weather is bad, and when existing in general. They get yelled at simultaneously in English and French, depending on location, sometimes by the same customer who's fluently bilingual but chooses violence. They make minimum wage, which in major cities means they're choosing between rent and food on a monthly basis. They've developed a highly tuned sixth sense for detecting Americans trying to pay with US dollars, then acting offended about exchange rates. They can switch languages mid-transaction without even thinking about it. A skill that should honestly pay way more than it does. They've been screamed at about prices they don't control, policies they didn't create, and items being out of stock during a global supply chain crisis. Someone always asks if they can check in the back, like there's a magical warehouse full of sold-out items hidden behind the staff room. They've perfected the customer service smile that says, "I am dead inside, but company policy requires this facial expression." They work every holiday because retail never closes, and someone has to sell last-minute greeting cards to unprepared people. Their feet hurt constantly, their back is destroyed from standing 8 hours daily, and they've completely lost faith in humanity's basic decency. But maintaining Canadian politeness under legitimate psychological warfare conditions is genuinely impressive and takes real strength. They're providing essential services while being treated like garbage by people who should know better. They deserve way more than minimum wage and way more respect than they get. Honestly, anyone who's rude to retail workers should be banned from shopping. That should be a law. The bilingual call center worker. Press 1 for English, appuyez sur 2 pour français, and welcome to the 9th circle of customer service hell, where souls go to die. This person switches languages mid-sentence without even noticing anymore, and both language groups think their accent is terrible. They can identify what province you're from just by how you pronounce about, and they've made a game of it to stay sane. They get screamed at bilingually about Rogers outages, billing errors, and problems they have zero power to fix because they're just reading scripts. Their soul visibly departed their body approximately 6 months into the job, but they keep showing up because bills exist. They've heard every insult in both official languages and developed immunity to verbal abuse that would hospitalize normal people. Someone always asks to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor says the exact same thing, and somehow that's satisfying to the customer. They're working from home now, which sounds great until you realize they're trapped in a studio apartment, taking abuse calls for 8 hours with nowhere to escape. They have quotas for call times and customer satisfaction scores that directly contradict each other, making their job literally impossible. Their script was written by someone who's never had a conversation with an actual human and makes them sound like robots. The hold music is the same 15-second loop that's driven approximately 4,000 people to madness. But honestly, they're actually bridging Canada's two solitudes while being verbally abused about problems they didn't create. They're providing essential multilingual customer service that keeps the country functioning across language barriers. Someone has to deal with angry customers and explain complicated policies in 2 languages, and that's genuinely skilled work that deserves respect. Plus, they say sorry even when customers are screaming at them, which is the most Canadian possible behavior and should be celebrated. Regional rivalries. Alberta hates everyone. Toronto hates being reminded that other cities exist. Quebec hates English Canada, and the Maritimes hate being forgotten completely. Everyone is united exclusively in hating Toronto and loving Tim Hortons, then immediately splits back into regional warfare. British Columbia thinks they're not really part of Canada because they're too chill and mountainous to deal with prairie drama. The prairies think Ontario and Quebec are stealing their money through equalization, and they're not entirely wrong about that. Ontario thinks it's the center of everything because Toronto exists, and they're also not entirely wrong, but are insufferable about it. Quebec threatens to separate every decade or so depending on election results and language law disputes. The Maritimes are just trying to survive economically, while everyone else forgets they exist until tourist season. Someone from Calgary will fight someone from Edmonton over which city is better, even though they're basically identical. Vancouver and Toronto people argue about which city is more unaffordable, like it's a competition they want to win. Saskatchewan and Manitoba are just happy to be mentioned in conversations about Canada, even if it's negative. The territories exist in a completely different dimension and only get remembered when polar bears make the news. But honestly, healthy regional pride and rivalry makes the country way more interesting than boring homogeneous nationalism. These are friendly rivalries for the most part, not actual hate, and they create cultural diversity within one country. It keeps provinces proud of their unique identities while still being Canadian, which is honestly a pretty good balance. Plus, the trash talk between regions is hilarious and brings people together through shared roasting. The healthcare. Wait time. Canadian healthcare is free at point of service, but you'll wait 8 hours in emergency for anything less than active dying. Getting a family doctor requires joining a waitlist that's approximately 2 years long in major cities, if you're lucky enough to find one accepting patients. Everything requires a referral to a specialist, and getting that referral requires 3 appointments spread over 6 months for some reason. You can break your leg and get it fixed for free, but you'll be sitting in emergency next to someone having a heart attack and someone who has a cold. The triage system means actually emergent cases get seen first, which is correct medically, but infuriating when you've been waiting since 9 a.m. Walk-in clinics exist, but have 4-hour waits and close randomly because the doctor decided to take a day off. Booking any specialist appointment is a 6-month minimum wait. Unless you're literally dying, then it's 3 months. Americans brag about their fast healthcare, and Canadians brag about not going bankrupt. And both systems are broken in completely different ways. Someone always has a horror story about waiting times that may or may not be exaggerated for effect. Mental health services are technically covered, but good luck finding a psychiatrist accepting patients in this decade. But honestly, it's actually free at point of service. And nobody gets denied care because they're poor. Universal coverage means everyone gets treated eventually, regardless of income or employment status. Yeah, it's slow, but slow healthcare is infinitely better than no healthcare because you can't afford it. The system has massive problems that need fixing, but the foundation of universal access is something worth keeping and improving. The weather obsession. Every single conversation with a Canadian starts with discussing the weather like it's breaking news that seasons exist. Canadians complain about winter for 6 solid months, then complain that summer is too short the other 6 months. Minus 15 degrees is described as not that cold, but plus 30 degrees is unbearable heat, with zero consistency in temperature tolerance. Someone's always talking about wind chill. Like that makes the actual temperature less relevant, when really cold is cold. Regardless of wind, the Weather Network is everyone's most visited website, and people check it obsessively, like conditions will change if they refresh enough. Every Canadian has strong opinions about which season is worst, and will defend their position with genuine passion. Someone always brings up that one year it was minus 40 for 3 weeks straight, like they're a war veteran describing combat. Regional weather differences create genuine rivalry. Like Vancouverites bragging about mild winters, while Winnipeggers freeze to death with pride. Albertans experience all 4 seasons in one day and think this makes them tougher than people with predictable weather. Northerners roll their eyes at Southerners, complaining about minus 10 like it's the apocalypse when they're dealing with minus 45 regularly. But honestly, Canadian weather actually is dramatic enough to warrant constant discussion, and it affects everything you do. It's genuinely extreme compared to most places, swinging from minus 40 to plus 40 depending on season and location. Talking about weather is also perfectly safe small talk that everyone can relate to regardless of politics or background. It's a cultural commonality that brings people together, and honestly, the world could use more harmless conversation topics that don't cause fights. The apologizer. This is every Canadian who apologizes for literally everything, including existing, breathing, and taking up physical space in the universe. They say sorry when someone else bumps into them, when the weather is bad, when the store is out of stock, and when other people are rude. They apologize to inanimate objects after walking into them, including furniture, doors, lampposts, and occasionally trees. They say sorry to animals, definitely to dogs and cats, but also to squirrels and birds who cannot understand human language. If they're standing somewhere and you need to get past, they apologize while moving even though you're the one interrupting them. They apologize for apologizing too much after someone points out they've said sorry 6 times in 2 minutes. Their apologies aren't always admissions of guilt. Sometimes they're just social lubricant to keep interactions smooth and polite. Someone steps on their foot and they apologize for having their foot in steppable location, which is objectively insane but culturally normal. They'll apologize for things completely outside their control, like transit delays, other people being late, or general existence of problems. Getting them to stop apologizing is impossible because asking them to stop just makes them apologize for apologizing too much. Foreign visitors find it baffling and endearing simultaneously, like watching the entire country with pathological politeness disorder. But honestly, this actually does make society more polite and pleasant overall compared to places where everyone's aggressively rude. Apologizing diffuses conflicts before they start, creates kinder interactions, and builds a culture of consideration for others. Yeah, it's excessive and sometimes ridiculous, but the world genuinely could use way more politeness and way less aggression. Canadian niceness might be a stereotype, but it's one worth keeping, and honestly, other countries should try it instead of whatever hostile nonsense they're doing. So yeah, those are all the negative Canadian stereotypes explained in one video. Some are definitely true, some are exaggerated, and some only apply to specific regions or people. Let me know which stereotype I got completely wrong, or which one I missed entirely. Subscribe for more videos roasting countries with affection. And remember, if you're offended, sorry, not sorry.